The PopSugar Reading Challenge has been happening for 6 years now. I have been participating for 5 of those 6 years, and I have never completed the challenge yet. A lot of other people do complete the challenge. It's completely doable, but I'm kind of slow at reading sometimes, so I haven't quite got it. But I don't give up because I really enjoy the challenge. So I am participating in the 2020 PopSugar Reading Challenge. My name is Linda Jo Martin, and I'm known on BookTube as Book Lady. So this video is about how many books I have read so far this year that qualify as being part of the PopSugar Reading Challenge. Now they give us a list of 50 prompts. They change from year to year. And I go through the prompts and I choose books that fit. So these are the books that I have read so far. There's 18 of them, so I'm going to go through this really fast as much as I can and say very little about each of these books. So it isn't like an in-depth review, but the first one that I read, this was January. In January I read 5 books. The first one was The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides, and it filled prompt number 17, a medical thriller. It was 336 pages. So I am keeping track of my page counts because I just want to know how much I'm reading. In case you haven't heard of it, The Silent Patient is a thriller about a woman in a mental hospital. It's very good. I recommend it. Where the Crawdads Sing was my next book by Delia Owens, and it fit prompt number 33, a book with at least a 4-star rating on Goodreads, and it was 432 pages. A lot of people know what this book is about already. A girl living in the swamps down in, I believe, North Carolina, and just her whole life, really, from start to finish. Then also with my local book club, the River Readers, we read Little Fires Everywhere by Celeste Ng, prompt number 3, a book with a great first line, 368 pages, very entertaining. The 4th book that I read in January is Beneath a Scarlet Sky by Sullivan. It is a book about World War II. It fit prompt number 24, a book on a subject you know nothing about, 523 pages. The last book that I read in January was Miracle at the Higher Grounds Café by Lucado. It is a Christian book, pretty much light reading, entertaining. Prompt number 26, a book with a pun in the title, and it was 192 pages. So in February, I read 9 books. Started with The Witch Elm by Tana French, which is a murder mystery. Prompt number 35, a book with a 3-word title, The Witch Elm, 528 pages. The next book that I read was Daughters of the Lake by Wendy Webb, another murder mystery. It was for prompt number 20, a book you picked because the title caught your attention, 319 pages. The next book that I read in February is a memoir project by Marion Roach Smith. It was very short, and I read it because I'm writing a memoir this year. So that was for prompt number 29, a book with a bird on the cover, 128 pages. The next book is Digging In by Loretta Nyhan. It was light reading. It was for prompt number 12, a book that passes the Bechdel test. The Bechdel test. I looked that up on the internet so I could tell you exactly what it says. This is from the Wikipedia page. The Bechdel test was published as a rule or measurement of the representation of women in Hollywood films by Alison Bechdel in 1985. So there's 2 aspects to this. 1, at least 2 women must talk to each other. And number 2, they must be talking about something other than a man. The next book that I read in February is My Brilliant Friend, because one of my friends at the River Readers Book Club here in town wanted somebody else in the club to read it with her, and so we read it and discussed it. It's by Elena Ferrante. It's the first in a trilogy. I'm not going to read the second two books. It was pretty much just a story about two girls growing up in Italy. It was nice. I mean, I enjoyed it, but it wasn't, I didn't want to take time out of my year to read the other two novels in the series. So that was for prompt number 6, a Bill Dung's Roman. I looked up the definition of that here. A Bill Dung's Roman is a novel dealing with one person's formative years or spiritual education. And the next book that I read was an old science fiction book called Native Tongue by Suzette Hayden Elgin. I think this was published back in the 70s originally. So it is for prompt number 18, a book with a made-up language, and it was 400 pages. Following that, I read Beloved by Toni Morrison. For prompt number 13, a book with the same title as a movie or TV show but is unrelated to it. So apparently there was a TV show or series called Beloved, but it didn't last long. That was 321 pages, one of the best novels I've ever read. Just astounding, really. I recommend that. The next book I read was Between the World and Me by Ta-Nehisi Coates. It is a letter that he wrote to his son. I was not the intended audience and it didn't really entertain me. It was nonfiction. Anyhow, prompt number 25, a book with only words on the cover, no images or graphics, 176 pages. And then the last book that I read in February is Lab Girl, a memoir by Hope Jaron. For prompt number 22, a book about or by a woman in STEM, S-T-E-M. And that was 304 pages. It was excellent. I would recommend that book. It was really interesting hearing what her life was like in trying to run a lab on a college campus. And yeah, interesting. I should say the total pages that I had in February were 2,759, and that's a lot more than I usually can read. I think 1,500 is usually plenty for me for a month. But in March, I slowed down quite a bit because of two things that happened. First of all, spring has sprung, and second of all, we got hit with the coronavirus crisis in the country. So I started the month by reading The 13th Tale by Diane Setterfield. Excellent book about two older women who are both writers, and I really liked that. So this was for prompt number 16, a book that has a book on the cover, 432 pages. And then I started reading Lonesome Dove for the March of the Mammoth. And that's by Larry McMurtry. And it was for, the prompt was a Western. I had to read a Western for the PopSugar Reading Challenge. I read about half of it in March and the other half in April. After that, I read The Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde by Robert Louis Stevenson. For prompt number 5, a book set in a city that has hosted the Olympics, which is London, which has actually hosted the Olympics 3 times. And that was a very short book, only 64 pages. After that, I read American Dirt by Janine Cummins. For prompt number 1, a book published in 2020, and that's 400 pages. So that's everything that I've read so far for the PopSugar Reading Challenge this year. I read 18 books in the first quadrimester, which is a 4-month period. And I figured that if I read that much during the last 2 quadrimesters, then I will easily read over 50 books for this PopSugar Reading Challenge list. So I have hope still that I can somehow finish this challenge this year.